Hello, world. My name is John. I'm the CTO of Pangea.app, and thank you for joining me in my workshop today. We will be covering creating a React Native, Expo, Firebase, Firestore app really quickly. That is the goal. And to do that, we will be using this open source repo that I created called John Starter Kit. And what the starter kit is it's basically a bunch of boilerplate code to just make things super easy to get started with this particular tech stack. This is a pretty common tech stack, I'd say. They're like all of these tools are very well supported. I tried to make sure that we are using things that won't be gone in 5 years, hopefully. Um, but this starter kit really is designed for the hacker in the hackathon because I have been to a few hackathons and they really were the reason why I started loving computer science and programming, but I've also had miserable experiences at hackathons. And it's usually when you end up spending so much time on something and you feel like, and you're not able to get it to work, and you just feel like you've wasted all this time. Um, and it's just a bad feeling. And I don't want people to go through that. But I do love hackathons because it's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to learn new things. I've learned so much from just other people at hackathons. So this starter kit is really for any app. I guess it's more designed for platform apps. So the type of app that this wouldn't really be helpful for is like a utility app that doesn't rely on a platform, like doesn't rely on users or a network. If it is just like local to your phone or like your website, then this a lot of the boilerplate code might not be useful. But I think you could still like delete a lot of it and get a lot out of this. So, um, well, with that being said, I do want to let everyone know that this is kind of an intermediate level course or workshop. I'm not going to go over some of the details of React Native. There have been other workshops that have covered that, and they really do an amazing job. So I would suggest watching those videos before watching this one. It'll just make it a lot easier to follow while I'm going through all of it. Um, so it is kind of expected that you know a little bit about, I guess, JavaScript, but hopefully, if you've even just built, like, let's say, a Swift app, hopefully this will not be too foreign for you to learn. And hopefully by honestly like the second time you use it, you'll notice that you're just saving so much time on building an app. So with that being said, this app is tri-platform supported. So we will be able to create an iOS, web, or Android app, which is awesome. We will be using Firebase Authentication system, and we will also be using Firestore for our backend solution. We will be using Firebase and Expo for deployment and hosting. And there's also a bunch of boilerplate code that I think is just super useful in any kind of typical UI. So we'll be using React Navigation and a few other packages in this React app. So the order of operations is I'm going to first just quickly go through the getting started as fast as possible so that anybody who is watching this could just quickly get to the app running. And then after that, I'm going to give a overview of the tech stack a bit. I'm going to walk through a few of the files and walk through some of the processes of like how everything is connected. And I'm even going to go over Redux really quick because we do use Redux as our like global state management system. And it will be helpful for when you're working on larger applications. I really think that Redux is an awesome tool that I love. So we'll be going over Redux really quickly, but enough so that if you've never come across it, hopefully you'll get enough of an understanding so that you can just fiddle around with it and learn that way. So that really is the plan for this workshop. So my goal is to save everyone as much time as possible creating an app, and hopefully this will help. So to get started, we are going to clone the repository. Just so everyone knows, the repository is github.com/jtambunt. That's me, John's-starter-kit. And it's open, so anybody could clone this. If you do end up liking this starter kit and you find it helpful, send me a like or a follow, please. And I also really want to know what people build with it. So I hope that somebody's able to build something cool and share it with me. I think that would be a lot of fun for me to see. So with that being said, let's clone this repo and get started. So I'm just going to download it as a zip. And going to open it. Sweet. So yeah, let's go over how to get the app up. So you're going to want to start by creating an Expo account. I'm not going to really go through this because I just want to fly through this as fast as possible. But just sign up to Expo. It's pretty simple, and that's like a really awesome tool to basically. It's like an add-on to basically any React Native app. You're also going to want to create a Firebase account. So if you just have a Google account, you could just sign in that way. And once you do sign in, then you're going to want to create a project. So I'm going to create a project. So once you've logged in, this is what you should see. You'll click on Get Started, and you're going to want to click Add Project. So you could call this whatever you want. I'm just going to call this My New Project 7. I don't even know how many new projects I made, but I like the number 7. So we will continue. This isn't really too important. This is just like enabling Google Analytics, which is cool, but not really something that we're going to cover. And while this is creating the app, there is a couple other steps that we're going to have to do in Firebase before we open up the code. But I will be covering that in a moment. So let me open up a terminal while this is loading. Okay, so we created the app, and you're going to want to, we created the project, and you're going to want to create a web app, which is this this tag icon. So call the app whatever you want, My New Project 7. For now, just skip the Firebase hosting. We will cover how to use Firebase to host your app, but we'll do that afterwards. And you could ignore this for now too. We will take a snippet of that code and add it to our configuration. But before we do that, let's just enable a few things. So we're going to want to enable authentication through email and password. So just click Enable. Then you're going to want to go to Cloud Firestore and just create the database. You could just use test mode for now. Again, we're not going to cover things like rules that you would need in like a production app. This is really just meant for getting things spun up really quickly for a hackathon. So Here, this doesn't matter too much either. It's just where what Google server we're going to be using. So just select whatever it suggests, hit enable. And while this is happening, we will be getting a configuration file and basically creating it in our repository. So now that we've done that, let's go to project settings, and we're going to want to copy, we're going to switch this to config and copy this snippet of code. So this is all kind of written here. So we just did this, we created the web app, we enabled email and password, we created the Firestore. So, and then we just copied the snippet. So the next thing that we're going to do is create a file called secrets, and this is going to be in the starter kit /config directory, and this is basically just going to map our your specific Firebase configuration to the app. So let's first cd into the app, and we're going to want to go to the config. Let me just extend this a little bit. And then we're going to want to create a secrets file. So I'm going to be a little fancy and use the terminal to do this, just to speed up some time. So what you're going to want to do is just add export in front of the file, and then save it. Great. So we're pretty much almost set up. The next thing is something I do want to go over before just running it. So what this is this command enables you to run this script on your local computer. And what this script does is, all it does is it installs a bunch of packages that you need for Node, for example. So a lot of you might already have this installed. For example, Homebrew, NVM. If you do, then I would just manually install any of these things that you don't have. Don't really run the script if you have your own setup and you don't want it to change. For example, if you're on some version of Node that you can't live without, this script changes it to Node 10 as a warning. So with that being said, if you don't know any of this, you could run this setup script. Just understand what is happening here. Basically, we're just installing Homebrew so we could install NVM. NVM is a Node version manager, so we could use it to install a particular version of NPM. And then with NPM, we're going to be installing 3 global packages: Yarn, the Expo CLI, and the Firebase CLI. And then once those 3 are installed, we are going to run yarn install. So I already have everything configured. I have my node pointing to Node 10. So I'm just going to run the yarn install, which installs the packages that are particular to this project. It seems like my webcam is frozen, so I'm just going to shut this off because now you know that I'm real, and it's not too necessary. Maybe I'll bring up a picture of me later in the video, but just for the sake of this going a little faster, I'm going to close this. So now we are ready for business. So this is just installing the npm packages that we're using. If you are new to JavaScript, basically these are just the dependencies. You could see them in the package.json file, and there's a lot of cool things that we have in this starter kit. So now that we've done that, we are pretty much set to run the app. So you want to run expo start. We downloaded the expo CLI, and that's why we have access to that command. And now we have this CLI that we could use to open up the app in Android, open it up in the iOS simulator, or open it up on web. So just for the sake of time, I'm just going to cover one of these. I'm just going to open it up on the iOS app. And hopefully this app works on both Android and on web. It is tri-platform supported. So while this is loading, this is just a reminder to download Xcode and update your software before the hackathon starts. It's something that I've done so many times, and I've wasted like hours installing Xcode and having my computer make updates and just sitting around not doing anything. So you want to avoid that, and that's why I'm bringing it up here, is because the iOS simulator uses Xcode. So you opened up the app in the simulator, and now you have a working starter kit app. So just to show you that it is working, we will be using this to sign up. I'm just going to create a fake account. Go away. Okay. Call this throwaway 127@gmail.com. Then put in a password. And yay, we created an account and we are now logged in to the home screen. So there's a lot here that we did, and there's a lot of code to show. Even though this app does look pretty simple right now, there's only 2 tabs. This is going to display some posts, and this is just a settings screen where you could log out or create the post. So that is the entire app, but there is a lot of awesome goodies in this, I'd say. So let's go ahead and look at the code. So I'm just going to open up VS Code. Okay, so this is the starter kit app. I think the easiest way to explain this would be to go through the app.js file and then start there with some of the tools that we use. And I'm going to branch out into explaining all of these directories and the file structures, and then go from there. So let's start at the app.js file. Again, I'm kind of assuming that you've have some experience with React Native. You should definitely watch those workshops to learn about React Native. This really isn't going to cover the fundamentals of that. That being said, this is basically the entry point of the app. And here you'll notice that we are running app loading. And what this does is it allows us to load and cache pictures, assets, and also fonts. Once this is done loading, then this component gets rendered. And this component has 3 things. It has a provider, another provider called React Redux Firebase provider, and root Navigator. Before I go over these 2, which for now I'm just going to say is Redux, I do want to go over the root Navigator. So the root Navigator is basically like the app itself too. It is how we handle navigating across screens. So we're going to open that up. This is in the root, the navigation folder, and root Navigator. So we're using React Navigation, specifically the most up-to-date version when I am recording this, which is v5. And it's really great for just building out like a navigation system. Like that's what it is. It's also considered routing, I guess, if you're on web. But I really like this system. So here you'll notice that we have this conditional. Basically, I'll go over what this means and like how we have this later. But basically what it is if we do have an authenticated user, we will automatically show them the main tab navigator, which is this right here, which has both these two tabs, and any of the other screens that an auth user should have access to. If the user isn't authed, for example, then we will be going to the login screen. This is sort of how React Navigation handles combining like authentication with their stack system. So this is the case of like the app still loading. This is when the Firebase like tried to find an auth user but just wasn't able to. So that is the root navigator. So similar to the root navigator, we have the main tab navigator. So this right here is this tab navigator. It's split up into two stacks, the settings stack, and I think this is called the home stack. Yep. And it's pretty self-explanatory. It's how we tie these screens to these tabs. Again, this is using React Navigation v5 syntax. So that's this file. I'm going to go back to the app.js file. So that is the root navigator. This is how we're able to navigate across screens. The next thing that you'll notice is this, which might be a little foreign to you if you haven't used Redux, because this really is just setting up Redux. This here is setting up React Redux, and then this is setting up Redux specifically for Firebase and Firestore, which I will be going over in a bit. Before I go over like Redux and like the Redux guide and like basically this Dux folder, I do want to sort of cover all of the main folders and the file structure. So this is like how we set up Redux. So we have our assets folder. This has our pictures and our fonts. We have the components folder. Before I go over the components folder, we actually have the screens folder, and this is the way that I like to break things up. So some other people will call this like containers, and it's not necessary that like a container has to be a screen either, but I've always found it easy to just call these screens and then just have a component that is like a full screen. That's just intuitive to me. So I put all of these like full screen components in this screens folder, and then anything that's like a subcomponent or a common component, I'd put here in components. So this is the screens folder. We have our components, which I just went over, our config folder. So this is our Firebase configuration. So this allows us to basically connect to Firebase, and this is the file that you created earlier to attach your particular configuration to Firebase. You also have a constants folder. It's exactly what you think it is. It's just a bunch of constants. So here we just like organize all of our the colors, for example. I don't think we're really actually utilizing this in the code, but this is a typography like file, and it's honestly a really great way of keeping your code dry is to follow some sense of a typography and utilize it so that you don't end up having like the same code over and over again, like this over here and the styles everywhere. So definitely use like the typography constants to keep your code dry. Lastly, in this folder, we have our environments. So this is really if you wanted to set up another environment for like production, and then you had some other like parameters that you wanted to toggle depending on if you wanted to test something on production or development. So for example, here this is our Redux Logger. What the Redux Logger is it prints out all of your Redux actions. again, I'm getting ahead of myself with Redux, but that is what this is. So for example, we're going to want to turn that off when we are deploying something on production. So that's our constants folder. I guess last, but certainly not least, is our ducks folder. So before I do want to show a diagram that will hopefully explain how like Redux works. But before doing that, I am just going to sort of explain it in like my like layman's understanding of it, and hopefully that'll be a little bit clearer than just showing you this like crazy diagram. So what is Redux? Redux is a global state like management solution. So what is the global state? The global state is, I like to think of it as a giant JavaScript object that all of your components have access to globally, hence like the global state. And what Redux is it's a way to manage like updating the global state, and we also use it to make network calls to our database. So I'll cover the actual file itself. I guess the easiest way to describe this would be to pull up a file to go over. So let's go over this login, and I kind of designed this login just so I could explain this a little clearer. So let's go into the codes. So this is a login screen, and you'll notice here that we have two text fields. We have email and password, and this uses this.props.email, which is actually taken from our global state. So we end up calling this map state to props function that decides like what piece of state to connect to this particular component, specifically this component's props. So we're mapping our global state to this component's props. So email and password is now something that we could access here. I guess to really show everyone what I mean by a global state, I'll show the root reducer. So the root reducer just combines each of these like slices of state is how I describe it. I mean, you could look at this right now and see that this is a JavaScript object. And this is basically the object that you have access to globally. So in the user session reducer, we have this user session object that has like a bunch of state, as well as these other reducers. And we also have Firebase and Firestore. So I think I mentioned earlier that we connect Firebase and Firestore with Redux. So this is actually going to like sync up with our database and our authentication system. So think of these each as a slice of state that we can update in a way. So let's look at one of these ducks files. So if you've used Redux before, you might not like follow this file structure, and this might look just like completely like it might look like an anti-pattern, and maybe it is, but it's actually just like super convenient. And I found that 90% of the cases is that I want to structure my files like this. So what it is we're basically just putting all the things that are relevant to one slice of state into one file. And this will be a little bit clearer when I do show the diagram. But you'll notice that we have types, reducer, and actions all in one file. And this is what we call a duck. So I didn't create this. This is something that I stumbled across, and I really do like it. It just makes things easier. Like if you are updating an action, you don't have to do it in 3 files. You could just use like this one file. And it's just easier to read. So that's like the a little different from what you'd see in other apps. I do sort of cover in this tutorial how like the file structure looks differently. And then this is the diagram. So why don't we just go over this? So this is the screen, and we have connected these two like components, or like these two text inputs, to our global state by passing it in the email and password. So what this diagram, we'll start with the user in this diagram. So the user is going to manipulate some UI. In this case, they're either going to type in the text field or press like login. So when you type here, we are calling update login, I believe. And passing it in this data that is within this component. So this is the action that we are firing. And you'll see in the diagram here, that is us dispatching this action. So let's trace this a little bit. We'll go into the user session duck and look up the action. So this takes in, again, the data that we got from the component, and then we fire this dispatch action, and it includes a payload. So the next piece of like Redux is, or understanding Redux is the reducer. So what the reducer is it basically takes in 2 inputs. It takes in the previous global state and an action. So for example, here it would be update login with like in the email here updated. So it takes in the initial state and the action and its payload, and it manipulates, or rather, it returns a new state that is manipulated in some capacity by the action. So for example, here we call update login, and we're simply just putting in the payload into our global state. So here is like the slice of state that we have. Next, we will show how this component like receives that. Let's go back to the diagram. So here, what we did was we passed in this action to the reducer. We decided what to do with that payload, and then we returned a new state. And yeah, so this is I didn't really explain the store at all yet, and honestly, I feel like the easiest way to learn Redux is just to understand that the store is just a configuration file that you don't really change that much. It's this file, and you could use it to add middleware. So for example, you could use it to add like the logger that we had and stuff like that. But it's just the thing that allows you to use Redux. I know I'm butchering that, but that's just the reality of it in my head. So you update the email, and it dispatches an action, changes the reducers. It tells the component to re-render with that character. So that is an example of how we're using Redux to manage our global state. And I say global state because this is now, like this data is now not just living within this component. So if I go to the sign up screen, we actually are using that the same email and password in our global state for these 2 fields, which is why like I'm able to like edit this, and like this is edited automatically because I'm editing the global state. And you don't have to, for example, like you don't have to use the global state for this. Like you could just use set state here, and create the email. But this is really just as an example of showing how you could use Redux. So the next step would be, I guess, walking through what happens when we click sign up and what happens when we actually run a network call to Firebase. So again, I'm going to open up the sign up screen and walk through like this screen too. So you'll notice here that we are just attaching these two fields into the set state. So this really, this really is just like local to this component. Same thing with this. We are using the global state for this field though, just to show that you could, like, there are times when you could, or where you want to, and times when you don't want to use the global state. And I'm not going to really go over that too much in this tutorial. But anyway, this is now the form filled out, and we will click sign up. So what happens when we click sign up? So you'll notice that this is the sign up button. We fire this action called sign up, and this is defined in the user session duck. So let's look at the user session duck. This is the function, and these are basically the parameters that we inputted. And this is our first use of Firebase and our first network call, I guess. This is basically just like Firebase creating a user. And once we create the user, we then check to see if it was created successfully. If it is, then we actually do store the user into our Firestore database. So first we basically create the authenticated account, and then we add it to our database. So let's actually take a look at this right now. Let's take a look at our database. So going to Cloud Firestore, you should see that you now have a users collection with some document ID and the document here. This was the account that I created before. So this right here is connected to creating the document in Firestore. And then if you click on Authentication, this is the account that we're authenticating. So this here is associated with this piece of code. So that is how we are saving to the database. Once we get the confirmation that it's set, then we fire sign up success, which honestly these actions don't really do too much because we are using Firebase and Firestore for in Redux, which basically just means we're not updating the state really with anything. We're just changing some loading variable to false once it succeeds. And what we're doing is this here, Firebase automatically updates its state through using Redux. So when you'll notice that there is no sort of navigation function here, it doesn't say to go to the main tab, and this is because we configured our root navigator to actually handle updating based off of Redux. So going back to this file again, we have this.props.auth.uid. So how do we get this? This is the first example of going through using Firebase and using Firebase's slice of state. So that's what we're doing here is we're basically grabbing the auth field from Firebase, and this auth does get updated when we called that create account. So this prop changes and it causes this root navigator to re-render, and the re-render is what switches it basically to the main tab navigator. So for example, now that we've created an account, this exists, so we conditionally show our tabs. So this is kind of like a form of navigation in a sense, but this isn't like the normal way that you're going to be navigating across screens. So the next thing I want to cover as quickly as I can is the main is navigating to a new screen outside of like this. So we hit sign up, we created an account. You'll notice that when I click settings and create post, we go to a new screen. So let me just show you what that looks like in the code. You want to go to screens and settings. So here is the function that causes the screen to navigate to this other create post screen from the settings screen. You'll notice that when we press this button, we call this.props.navigation.navigate. So this is the main way that you're going to be navigating when you add like new screens to this, is by calling navigate with this.props.navigation. And the reason that we have access to this in like this component's props is because of the root navigator, and like this screen being in the root navigator allows us to call this.props.navigation. So I'm going to create a post to show you what that looks like when we're like trying to add data to our database, again using Redux. If this is kind of getting into the weeds, I apologize, but hopefully this will just make it clear. If you don't really have any experience with Redux, I am like stressing this a bit, just because I found this like once you get it, you get it, but it's a little complicated just like looking at this diagram, and it's just like I don't even know what's going on. So I am like spending a lot of time on Redux. That being said, let's go to creating the post. Actually, let's just go to the post screen first. One second, let me just drink some water. Okay, so this is the screen, and you'll notice that we are importing this create post action from our post duck. So here you'll see we are like mapping state to props, but you also will see this second argument here in that connect takes in, and for all intents and purposes, this is basically just where you put your actions. Technically, it's like dispatch state from props. I think I actually don't remember, but honestly, you can just forget about it. This is just where you put it in the actions. So you put this in. So we called create post, and let's look at the actual post duck. So first, let's type in a message. So this isn't connected to the global state. This is just calling this.setState. So just another example of sometimes you like could just use the component state. But when you do hit create post, it does call this. So you'll see that when I create post, it will magically navigate back to settings because that's working, and we will have the post here. So let's show what that looks like on the Redux side of things. So this is the create post action, and this is us basically creating the document to send to this collection. A collection is basically like a table if you're used to SQL. Again, this is using Firestore, which is a NoSQL database, and my like layman's understanding of NoSQL versus SQL is that SQL is for like structured tables, and NoSQL is for like unstructured data, or like, for example, like this post object could have extra fields, or it could have like less fields depending on what it is, and that's like how like this NoSQL database handles data. So this method set is what causes the post object to be set. So if I did have this opened, you would have seen this post being created here. Let's go ahead and update the post. So we have this other method called update post, and we fire it by liking it, or loving it rather. So we click on the heart icon, and it calls update post from the component. Trust me, it does. And then it updates this post object. Oh, I guess the one thing I wanted to show you was it getting updated in real time. So let's do that again. We're going to unlove it and then love it again. So here you'll notice that it updated in real time, and then you click like or love, and it adds it back. So how does this component know to update with this data? I'll show you that next, and that really is sort of the last bit of code that I'm gonna really go over. And yeah, and then I'll do a quick overview. But so let's go to the main screen. I keep on opening components. Let's go to the main screen and take a look at how we are connecting Redux to this component. So you'll see this here. This is like an extra connect. And what this is doing is it's creating a listener into our database. It's basically just listening to our database for any changes on all of our posts, like the entire collection of posts. And it just so happens that we're also ordering it by reverse time. So now that we have this listener, we're able to map state to props, map the state of the posts to this component's props. And we do so by getting the ordered array out of Firestore and assigning it to posts. So now that we have this here, you'll notice that we could call this .props.posts. And this gets updated every time that there's a change in the collection, the posts collection, which is what makes this sort of real time, is that it automatically re-renders, which is pretty cool. So that is how we connect a table, like an entire list, using connect. And I guess another thing I could go over is how to deploy this app. So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover as far as the contents. Hopefully that was enough to allow you to fiddle around with some of these things and test the waters and just get more familiar with the Redux side of things. But the next thing I want to do is deploy, because why not? So I'm actually going to close the simulator, and I'm going to run the app on the web. So you want to run expo start. Okay, so now instead of pressing I, I'm going to press W. So while this is going, basically I'm just going to explain really quickly what we're going to do. This is actually in the coming soon section, so it's a little bit of a bonus. But what we're going to do is we're going to use Firebase to host the web version of our app. So we're going to use Expo to build the app, and then we're going to use Firebase hosting to host it. So this is the app, and obviously this is kind of designed for mobile devices, but you could make an entire web app with this tech stack. You don't have to necessarily create a mobile app, but you are going to be using React Native to code. Just something to be aware of. So the app looks good. I am ready to deploy. So let's build this. So all you have to do is run expo:/build, and I believe it is web, or is it expo build rather? What is it? Wow, I feel silly. So it is expo build:/web. I knew that. And that is how we are going to be building it into basically a directory. So what's happening in the background is you'll notice that we did just get a new folder called web build, and then this is going to have like the bundled version of the web app. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. My email is John@Pangea.app. I always love talking to programmers, and I'm always interested in meeting new people. And I'm also really curious to see what everyone's able to build with this. It should be pretty cool. So this is still going. I guess I could open another terminal to do this, but I just want to let this thing do its thing. Watch, as soon as I get to the folder, it's going to be ready. So I'm going to call Firebase init here. Actually, Control C. I'm going to create Firebase init within the folder. It looks like it worked. I think there's some things that we aren't like optimizing, but now we have our web app completely in this like one web build. So we're going to want to use. Let me just close this just to make it a little bit easier. This is my background. Let me select hosting to add hosting, which is what we want. You can ignore pretty much everything else. Let's use an existing project. And oh, I think I'm logged in as my other user. So yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. What do you want to use as your public directory? So this is something that you want to be specific about. So you'll notice that we did build or Expo did build it into this directory. So we're just going to want to call it the same thing. So that is our public directory. Configure as a single page app, sure. Yes, we're going to overwrite file. Oh no, we're not going to overwrite this. Jeez, because this has like all of the code. Sweet. So if I did that correctly, I think we could just call Firebase deploy. Okay, and then you just want to open this up. And bam, now your app is live on the interwebs. So thank you again for taking the time to watch this. Hopefully it was useful and it will save you some time in the future. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Please star the project if you do use it, and let me know. So yeah, that's basically it. Enjoy your starter kit app, and happy coding.